So I guess today, at a high level, this is kind of what we wanted to go through to just do some framing around really what our solution provides, obviously, for commodity processors. And I'd say for agribusiness in general as well. But obviously, as we look at some of the leverage functionality, there's commodities and things of that nature that need to be tackled as some of those work streams. We're so much more than just that, I guess is what I want to kind of say here. So first off, let's start with like why Microsoft, right? So why did we decide to use that platform? How are we moving forward with it? We're going to talk about finance and the supply chain application at a very high level so you can kind of understand those gains that you get off of it. And then why leverage? I really want Keith to talk through some of the more ag specific scenarios that we support and that we actually implement. So that way you can kind of know like where do we play, so to speak, in terms of capabilities. And then finally, we really want to talk about the Power Platform and then the future. I don't want to, stay focused on an entire presentation with AI. There's a lot of companies, especially in commodity processing and in agribusiness itself in general, that just don't even have base, good, solid platform capabilities that they're really going to need for the future. So today is more about kind of aligning that. And then what we can do, obviously, is if you have more interest around this, Keith and I, we love to do demos. We'll show you the software, we'll go into it and then show you all the capabilities. But really today is all about that framing as we go through this. So I'm going to quickly run through a lot of these conversations. And really the first thing here is the fact that when we start thinking about when you're going to be looking at replacing a business system that runs your organization, the central nervous system basically of your organization, really we start with this concept of saying that it's all about data, right? So some of the things here that are really important is that Microsoft focuses on this digital transformation concept, which is about engaging, optimizing, empower, and transforming an organization. And they always use that very generally, right? But when we come involved in that picture as a system implementer, really what we're trying to do is to be able to harness that technology to make our lives easier, right? That's the intent of technology in its purest aspect, is to make our lives easier so that we can do more things that we love, like hang out with family or going to weddings and enjoying ourselves, obviously, as we go through this adventure, right? So one of the things that I just want to kind of announce here is like when we think about agribusiness, that general message is like, well, what does that have to do with us, right? I'm dealing with commodities in a system where I'm writing things down in Excel. I'm perfectly happy doing what I'm doing right now. I have no issues with this. Well, let's talk a little bit about kind of where things are changing as time goes on here. So at a very high level, when we think about the agriculture business, I'm going to make some blanket statements and people are going to have different opinions with this. And I get it. But I'm going to say just really candidly here, I don't feel that in the agriculture space, there's a market leader in terms of business systems in that market. There are brands that are out there. You've heard of them before as well. We integrate with a lot of them as well as part of that. But as in terms of a market leader, there's just not a really big company that's pushing some of the cool aspects that help enable, beyond just being cool, that helps start saving money for businesses. And really what I've started to notice here, and Keith opened my eyes to this and a lot of the team did as well, is that while ag has a very mature business process, the digitization of that business process is extremely low in many ag-based businesses. And the problem with that is that what happens is that all these different ag customers that we interact with are buying all these separate systems in those conversations. And then they're trying to integrate it. They're trying to make it work with different cultures in terms of, you've got a software company that's based in Denmark that sells it, or even in the US, but they're in the central region. So they deal with grain more than they deal with beans or whatever it is, right? There's all these different aspects that come into play with it. And really what we need is a solid platform to be able to build things off of, to be able to address in a lot of these requirements that you have inside of your business. Now, this is where obviously that Microsoft Cloud Platform concept comes into play, right? So when you look at Microsoft, don't look at it as we're trying to sell everything to you in the Microsoft platform. That's absolutely not the case. What we want to do is we want to use the right tools to align to the business need that you have. So, just as a quick example around that, we want to make sure that your data is safe and secured and it's accessible via the cloud. It's your data, you own it. We're not using it to train AIs or anything else like that. And what you're able to do is be able to control, obviously, that data. But on top of data, as you can imagine, there's a bunch of other services that allow us to address those needs of an agribusiness that are not mass appeal, so to speak, where it's going to be something across all industries. An example of that would be when we look at the technological solutions for identifying, for example, fertilizer rates inside of a field when we're using some of that ag tech, right? Well, they're able to use computer vision to be able to denote then coloration changes to then obviously align then the nutrient requirement that's there for really those crops. Do I need more potassium, nitrogen, whatever it is, to be able to basically support the best crop or best yield I can actually have? So the Azure platform, from an intelligence-based perspective, is giving companies the ability to tackle problems like that, to automate things using bots and things of that nature, to use the Power Platform, to use Power BI and reporting to expand upon that, to use Dynamics 365, because candidly, why would you want to reinvent how a general ledger works? Why would you want to buy a solution from a company that doesn't exist in general ledger as their pure base, for example, and they've added it on as an afterthought basically into your business? Because the big thing that's important here is the fact that when you build a solid platform, you've got more access to partners than that can build solutions on that. Case in point, I have yet to go to a commodity processor that isn't excited about automated AP capabilities, because they want to make it so that when they're getting invoices that they have less touch in that, and they can just automate basically those processes as long as they align to the rules of the business, right? So why waste time on things that are common? We want to go and focus on exceptions typically in our business process to identify then obviously what we could then standardize in the future here. And what it really boils down to is that we are seeing really this conjoining really of these business systems from a Microsoft perspective. You can buy CRM now to do, for example, what we call Dynamics 365 sales, to manage basically your sales teams. And even like if you're not going to do that, I mean, how awesome would it be to be able to basically know your grower, who the family is, when their anniversaries are, sending them gifts, like just things that are just the personal aspect of this from a business perspective that technology can once again help and enable inside of your business. And really the benefits are pretty clear here too. So when we look at the benefits, if you look at, for example, Microsoft, coupled obviously with Leverage as well, you really get a foundational modern business system. You can address business challenges now with the right tool. You don't have to use a hammer to put a railroad spike in when you should be using a sledgehammer, right? So you can use these tools that are right for you to be able to then address really that business need. The other aspect of it is that there is a large partner and community network that's out there. So, for example, if Stone Ridge or Leverage isn't around for some weird reason, which we don't plan to be, but let's say that is the case, you do have the ability to take that investment and work with other partners to be able to continue to expand upon it. And one of the things that I have found very interesting, and I think is a very good thing for agribusiness, is the concept of cross pollination of these industry leading business practices or best practices that we can apply then into your agribusiness that may or may not make sense. But at the same point, sometimes the newest innovations in agriculture have already been done in a different industry. Bringing that into that industry can be very, very advantageous. And then obviously the strategic advantage of having resources that you can find that know Dynamics, because it's a very, very common type of product that is out there, as you can imagine. So, kind of finally here, I did want to leave with just a couple of things before I kind of introduce Keith here in terms of the leverage capability. The first is obviously if we look at Microsoft's platform versus probably what you're going down the path of if you haven't used Dynamics as an example, we're all unified inside of the Microsoft platform. I can have Teams talk to Dynamics. I can have Dynamics embed Teams. There's all these great capabilities. Whereas when we look at point solutions, you can see it really becomes like this, where our competition really has to build integrations and you have to have one application that you have to map to this application. The benefit, obviously, of Microsoft is the fact that we're all in one family. And so, with that, then, though, remember when we look at Leverage, which is really more of that commodity specific capability, we're building on that foundation of all those technologies that you can use to address a lot of these needs. You can create a Power App where you could have an agronomist take pictures to send it to your company, and then it would show up inside of Dynamics maybe as an order. You could create that without involving StoneRidge, as an example. And you can also then use Dataverse to secure and store your data as part of that. So there's just a lot of great capabilities from a leverage perspective that you want to look at as part of this conversation. But our job is to help demystify it, is to help educate with it. It's really not to sell it. It's more just to say, hey, here's the option you have, here's the price it is, here's the value you're going to get off of it. Let's see if this is something that you want to move forward with, right? So we really do look at it with, I guess, maybe Keith, the right way to say it is kind of that Midwestern attitude of really just being to the point. Like, if I don't feel it's going to be a good value for you, I don't want to suggest it to you, because quite candidly, I don't want to have you go a year down the road and then be like, hey, Scott, that didn't work. In ag, we know everybody, right? It's like one of those things where you don't want to have that reputation, and that's what we've really led with and has been very successful for us. I don't know, Keith, you've got some specifics here on leverage you want to go through too, right? I don't want to steal all the thunder.
No, that's awesome, Scott. I appreciate that. So one of the things you talked about earlier on was you talked about Dynamics 365 finance and operations, and how that provides your general ledger and your accounts payable and your accounts receivable functionality. That's kind of generic for the whole for a lot of industries, right? Not just agriculture. But in agriculture, Scott, as you know, we do some things that are a little bit weird. And so what we have added to the Dynamics 365 is our leverage product, which handles the agricultural specific things. So let's talk a little bit about it. I want to talk a little bit about, just what are those things. We can really categorize them into kind of three pieces using our leverage commodity accounting. So the three pieces that we're going to talk with you about is the inbound commodity, the purchasing of the commodity, the product, whether it's corn or beans or whatever the commodity is. There's some uniquenesses there. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the sales of those commodities, right? Whether we've processed it into ethanol or soybean meal or whatever type of product we might be selling, feed or seed. We'll talk about that outbound. We have some uniquenesses there. And probably the real key is just the risk management, managing your price risk and your exposure to the market. So we've built some things in leverage that is specifically for those agricultural risk things. And we're going to get into that a little bit more detail right now. So first of all, let's take a look at the leverage, talk about a little bit about the leverage inbound commodity processes. So one of the things, we really break it into three pieces. And one of the major pieces that were quite unique in agriculture is the contracting piece. So with purchase contracts, it's not just like a simple old sales or a purchase order, right? There's more complexities to it. We have delivery periods, like, hey, when is the grower going to deliver it? Or maybe we're buying from other grain elevators. When are they going to deliver the product? What is the pricing? And with all the pricing, we have the board price and the basis price and the net price on a lot of these commodities, and we want to track those components separate and manage those and report on those. So leverage has that ability then to just break those two pieces or even more pieces of the pricing components out. We have contract types like, hey, it might not be fully priced yet. We maybe have the basis. We maybe have a basis contract, or maybe we just have the futures price set, or maybe it's no price set at all. We handle all those kind of uniquenesses inside of the leverage commodity accounting purchase contract thing. Other things like, weights and grades to govern. We have two weights, one of the origin weight where it was weighed before it was sent to, or delivered to us, and then we have the destination weight. Well, which weights govern the quantity on the contract? And whether it's the delivered or the delivery terms or freight on the buyer. And then another thing we've just added to the product is currency. So if you're doing business internationally and you want to do you're a U.S. company and you want to sell a contract using Canadian dollars, we can do that. And it does all the multi-currency conversions and that type of thing, along with the units of measure. So you can sell in metric tons, but keep your inventory in bushels. Levridge handles all that stuff seamlessly. So all those contract things, we've built special functionality on top of D360 to handle that. In addition, then the next step is after you have the purchase contract, certainly the grower or the grain elevator or whoever we're buying from will deliver that product. And so we have got a lot of integrations to scale systems, whether it's one way, a CompuWay, we use a standard Ag XML message to bring those scale tickets in, or if you need to, you can just key the delivery ticket, the scale ticket into the system. But we have some uniquenesses in Ag there too. So we have splits. If you have a grower or a group of growers that you're buying for, maybe it's a father, son, we need to split that scale ticket ownership between two. We handle that. That's a little unique in agriculture, so we've built that in. And we also track that inbound in transit. So if you're buying inbound rail, we have a full tracking system there, as you can imagine, loading from the time it's loaded at the origin site and then when it's unloaded at your site. And then the final step, of course, settlement. We have to pay. And so with that, you've got the discounts for the grade discounts. We handle the shrink for things like foreign material or high moisture. We handle lien holders if you need to pay. You have to have someone else's name on the check. Deferred payment was great in agriculture. As you know, hey, maybe we don't want to get taxed on it this year. The grower doesn't want to get taxed, so we're going to pay them in January. And then all the, and this isn't so unique to agriculture, but whether it's a check or an ACH or an EFT, we handle all of that stuff. So there's a lot of great functionality specific to agriculture that we've built on top of Dynamics 365. In addition, we've done some things too for the sales side or the outbound side. The sales contracts, again, fairly unique with the way we handle delivery periods and pricing and units of measure. One thing we did on the on the sales side is we handle a load-based contract. So you're not contracting for 50,000 tons, you're contracting for 50 loads or whatever that may be. So it tracks load by load. And with that, you can have a load order that is generated to help you plan those shipments and when they might go out and where they're going. That's an optional step if you want to do that. But then the actual shipment itself, similar to inbound, we have the scale tickets and integrations to scale systems to track those outbound shipments and tracking and pricing in transit. And then, of course, the sales invoicing of that particular outbound product. But the key to Levridge, to really why a lot of this stuff even exists, is just the managing of the risk, the pricing risk and the delivery risk if you're in a plant that needs to have enough product purchase to keep your plant going. Things like the futures and options, we have a very robust functionality that we've added just so you can buy futures on the Board of Trades, keep track of those futures, even options, and have them show up in your position report, your long short risk position or delivery position. We have that regulatory daily position report that shows the position of your inventory that's always needed, and then the ability to bring all those contracts at the end to market price for accounting. You have to have the unrealized gain or losses on those contracts and hedges and inventory there as part of the market function. All those are fairly unique to agriculture, and that's the things that we have built out inside of Levridge to capture that data. It's the data part and the business functionality that you need to start, some of the advanced, well, A, to run your business, and B, to be able to do some analysis on later. With that, Scott, you want to talk about the Power Platform and some of that analysis and some of those things we can do?
Yeah, absolutely, Keith. I do have to say one thing though. I think the first slide here is really about
Oh
Power
yeah.
BI and what you've tackled here, right? So I guess let me do this real quickly to frame it just at a high level for the audience. So part of the advantage, obviously, of using then Dynamics in the Microsoft stack is the concept of the Power Platform. If you haven't heard about it, just really at a high level, it's a set of tools that I'll talk a little bit about after this example that allow you to extend or basically address business needs very quickly and easily. They advertised it as a low code, no code environment to actually go ahead and create solutions. And one of those is Power BI, right? So I don't know, like Keith, when you went through this adventure in terms of rethinking how a DPR would be or a commodity dashboard would be for that matter, you kind of came up with something very similar to this. And what is it, and why is this so advantageous, I guess, to companies that are looking at then leverage in the Microsoft platform?
Yeah, so an old guy like me, Scott, we're used to rows and columns of data, right? And we got real good at looking at row, column, total it up, do the math in your head, and be able to see, oh, hey, you know what? We are, get some results from all those rows and columns. But now they got a new terminology called visualizations that I
Right.
really kind of clung to. It says, hey, can we visualize the data? So one of the things I built here in this dashboard in the middle is a map of where are our purchase contracts, where are we buying this commodity from, and how much of it are we buying from each one. And that's, you see that map in the middle, I just plotted out all the different little spots where we're buying the commodity. And then I had surrounded that with more data, like, when are we busy at the scale? So you see the little chart on the left shows, hey, around noon we're a little bit busier. At the end of the day it pops up to be a little busy because all the growers come in at the last minute. And other data, like, how much of the contracts that we're supposed to get delivered this month are actually delivered. Are we running ahead, are we running behind? Just look at it, boom, you can see it right there on that little chart. And then, I got quality things there that says, hey, what's the quality of the product? Are we getting the protein we want and the wheat we want? Is it falling off? Is it going up? The average basis per month, those types of things. So just all in one thing, which would take probably 6 different reports of pages of data, rows and columns, where you'd have to figure it out. You can see it right here using the Power BI. And the cool part is, Scott, you aren't going to believe it, I made these myself, and I am
Right.
not that
Right.
technical.
Right. And that's
I
the
do
thing I
know where
just
the
want.
data is. Yeah.
Right. And that's the beautiful thing about it, because what it does is it allows you to really create, right? Like really go through and get to the core of what you need to tackle, which is, I don't want to be transactionally entering in data all day. I want to actually have something that presents to me and I'm like, hey, here's the information and maybe the actions I need to take as part of that, right? So that really, Keith, kind of to your points, gets into right the journey from reports to intelligence here as well, where eventually what we want to do is make these reports more where they're not a static report that you print out and highlight and use a highlighter to identify what's going on, but you're interactive, right? So even like yours is like at that interactive dashboards, the next level is like predictions, and you're kind of getting predictability in there when we're looking at, well, we could even have like days remaining, and you can even in that chart, for example, say for the delivered contract percentage, right? Like you should be here, but you're here, right? Type of a thing. And you have X amount of days that are remaining. Because what's going to happen here is we're going to look at more of this decision support and decision automation from a reporting perspective. And actually, from what I would classify as a general perspective when it comes to the Power Platform. So I just wanted to highlight it so you see it. This is the Power Platform. These are the apps that we use with it, Automate, the Analyze is Power BI, and then the Act is Power Apps. Once again, it's a really powerful tool. We just want to make mention of it because it really starts to play into really what the future holds inside of agribusiness. And so we're a big proponent, obviously, of this Microsoft Copilot. If you haven't heard about it, I'm going to just introduce it to you here so that you understand at a very high level what it is. Imagine having, if you're flying a plane, you have a co-pilot. What does a co-pilot do? They perform different tasks as you're flying the plane. I remember my father, when he got his pilot's license, I said, what's the most important thing that a pilot can do? And he said, fly the plane, like just fly the plane. And the co-pilot then goes through the checklist and all that other type of stuff, right? To make sure that we're basically doing what we're supposed to be doing. So Copilot is absolutely absolutely what we're going to see in the future here from an agribusiness perspective of what's going to help us basically get to that type of assistant, so to speak, where we can actually use natural language to interact then with this assistant. We can actually have it access our emails and our conversations. Like I use it daily now to basically find presentation content in our organization, or to basically say, what's my last email, respond to it with this, and it's just automatically basically doing it. And you can extend that as well, and it's just going to get better. And if you think about it, like Copilot for Leverage, like we're already going down the path of thinking about, well, in commodities, for example, having it so it's automated for bid transactions, where if you have a certain bid that comes in, you may want to do an offer, like maybe we can automate that by using AI that then can look at different sources to make a decision that might be 80-90% statistically right? We've got to be cautious on what we use it for. But other things would be like the scale volume predictions, like we kind of had that delivery predictions that were there, contract summary, so that when you open up a contract, instead of hunting for all the fields to figure out, well, what kind of contract it is, where is it at, has it actually been received against, you can send that data to Copilot and it'll say, oh, your contract is at this, you have this much that needs to still be delivered on it, so on and so forth. Like it can summarize all that for you very quickly and easily. So we are going to be looking obviously on more of these types of capabilities to then enable this. I'd show these just to kind of say, hey, it's coming. Like this is going to be a major thing, and this is not a problem looking, or a solution looking for a problem. We're starting to see it in all the Dynamics apps already foundationally, and it's really making businesses more accurate, timely, efficient as they go through that process. So just know that's what you're going to want to look at. Now, I do want to highlight, it's so the marketing message with AI, everyone says AI is the answer to everything. It isn't technically. So remember, this isn't all about Copilot. You need to think about automation inside of your business. You need to think about digitization of your processes, at least the data entry portion of it, because as you have these larger agribusinesses for competition, we know that the margins are already pretty slim, right? The more automation they're involving and the more they can do with their people, the more they're going to expand that margin ratio, as you can imagine. And if you're a smaller player, you're going to have to think about that, because you're going to have to provide the same quality and level of services that the other partners are providing that are inside of that business space, right? So we want to make sure that technology isn't the hindrance with that, is what it really boils down to. There's a lot more that goes into a relationship with people than just tech, but we don't want tech to be the problem, I guess, as part of that. And then finally, you should be working through your security and identity, and then also think about mobility as part of this conversation as well. Because longer term here, what's going to happen is that you are going to need, obviously, to have a little bit more in terms of that mobileness, being able to interact with the computer, for example, and to really drive that forward. So it's a pretty cool capability in that regard. So I guess we're kind of at time. I got the time check from Bree, so I've got the hook that's coming. I didn't see any questions that came in. I don't know if you do have any questions. Feel free to post them in here right now. Obviously, we'll answer what we can, and if we can't, we will absolutely follow up with you as well. Bree, any other comments? I don't think we've got any questions that came in, right?
I don't see any right now, but like Scott said, please feel free to post them even while I'm doing this wrap up or afterwards, or feel free to reach out to us. We have a little question box there, and then underneath that is a contact us button. So please feel free to reach out. Also, don't forget to fill out that post-event survey. It'll pop up when you exit this webinar. We'll send you a $10 Starbucks gift card. And then we have some really great resources over here. Check those out if you want to dig deeper on anything you learned today. But thank you so much, Scott and Keith. Appreciate
Absolutely,
it.
our
And
pleasure.
thank you everyone for joining us. We'll let you go since we're a little over time, but we'll see you next time. And thank you.